We made it to April. It is officially draft month, but before the Panthers can focus on the NFL draft, let's take a look at their depth chart and how they fared in free agency right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. We have finally made it. It is the month of April. April 1st is here, and we are only 24 days away from the 2024 NFL Draft up in Detroit, Michigan. The Carolina Panthers have embarked on what I believe was a successful free agency period starting in the middle of March. And on today's show, we'll talk about how they fared in free agency, and we'll take a look at the depth chart, both offensively, defensively, and, well, we already know what the special teams depth chart looks like now with J.J. Jansen forever back here in Carolina, Eddie Pinheiro, Johnny Hekker. But we're going to look at the offense, the defense, see what needs were filled and what needs remain as the Panthers head into this draft month of April and prepare for the 2024 NFL Draft at the end of the month. But, of course, let's start with the offense, because that's what we're all focused on here in Carolina after last season was one of the worst offenses in Carolina Panthers history. You can debate whether it was the last season's offense or whether it was 2010's offense. The result still yielded the number one pick. Now, unfortunately for the Carolina Panthers, this past season, they had already traded away the number one pick to the Bears. They don't have a first-round pick this year, and we're still all trying to cope with that. But we move on, and we focus on fixing what's around Bryce Young and getting Bryce Young's footwork and fundamentals to a place where, with things around him hopefully better, he will actually look like the number one overall pick the Carolina Panthers selected last year in the 2023 NFL Draft. So quarterback depth chart, there's only two quarterbacks right now. It's Bryce, it's Andy Dalton. There will be a change there at some point in time. Dave Canal was speaking last week at the NFL owners meetings at the Ritz-Carlton down in Orlando, said that he wants to use the third quarterback, which the Panthers did not utilize last year as far as the emergency third quarterback, that new rule change, and something I don't really see as being that valuable. If you're getting to a third quarterback, you're probably screwed anyways. Why take up a roster spot for someone who could help you via special teams of a quarterback who's only out there who you never want to see, quite honestly? But the Panthers do want to utilize that position this year by having a veteran. It's not going to be a developmental position. And looking at this team, the only quarterback they need to be worried about developing is Bryce Young. Who cares what the third quarterback or the fourth quarterback is doing in practice? What you care about is Bryce. So have Bryce there as QB1, Andy Dalton back as QB2, then whoever QB3 is, hopefully it's someone who's actually played and started in games in the NFL before. He can be QB3, and we can pray that we never see him come out on the field in 2024. Running back. There are 6 running backs currently on the roster right now. The top running back, RB1, is Chuba Hubbard, and it's not even by default. He won the job last year as Miles Sanders struggled with a groin injury and just inconsistent play once he actually got an opportunity later on that season when he was healthy. Chuba was the better back, and I'm excited about Chuba Hubbard this year as he has an opportunity to be the bell cow this season. We'll see how things work out with Miles Sanders once the Panthers do get to past June 1, whether they want to potentially cut him. He did take a $2 million roster bonus home back in March because he still was on the roster, and the Panthers would have lost $2 million of cap space had they cut him. And that was just a non-starter for a team that was trying to figure out how much space they would have, what they were going to do with a player in Brian Burns, whether they're going to bring back Frankie Louvu. And as we saw, they were very aggressive in the guard market, which we'll talk about here momentarily, in trying to fix things around Bryce. They needed to wait and see how that worked out. So right now, Miles Sanders is on the roster. Dave Canales is going to say a lot of great things about him, talk about how excited he is to see what he can do. But we know that Dan Morgan, the Panthers' new general manager, and Brant Tillis, Panthers cap and contract guy, they have a plan for what they want to do with Miles Sanders post June 1, and we'll see if that's him still on the roster. At this point in time, looking at the rest of the depth chart, you have Raheem Blackshear, who can come back and help as kick returner with the rule changes last week. Having a kick returner who's going to be someone who's solid and can make plays is now important again in the NFL. Before, I couldn't really care who the punt returner is or who the kick returner is. Now they have that back to being an important play, and that only magnifies that spot on the roster right now for Raheem Blackshear. That is his ticket to the roster in Carolina in 2024. Tarik Cohen, someone who possibly could help as a returner, was an excellent returner, an all-pro returner back in Chicago when he was healthy. He has not played a game since the 2020 pandemic season. Fans were obsessed over him last year. Hey, can Tarik Cohen come in here and help this offense? Can he do something for us? And we did not see him. He suffered an injury as he was on the practice squad, then came back, and he was available that final week of the season. And I felt like it would have been a nice story in a lost season to have a player who's from North Carolina, played at A&T, really was a solid player for the Bears, who then just had tragic injuries to his knee in 2020, tearing his Achilles live on IG Live. Why not give him an opportunity? And they didn't give him an opportunity. I'm still going to say, as I said in the past, just don't expect too much out of Tarik Cohen, someone who's not played again since 2020. Spencer Brown is back on the roster right now, and then Mike Boone wraps up the running back position in Carolina. Chuba, Miles, Raheem, those are the three names we're focused on right now in this offseason. Wide receiver. Oh, buddy, the Panthers needed to do something at wide receiver, and they did, trading away Dante Jackson and a 6th-round pick to Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson and a 7th-round pick. So effectively got rid of a player they were going to cut and only gave up a 6th-round pick and got a 7th-round pick in return and a starting receiver, a former All-Pro as a returner, a former Pro Bowler 2 seasons ago. Deontay Johnson is an elite separator, an elite route runner, and the kind of player that you want to get for a young quarterback, and they've gotten that here in Carolina. I'm not concerned about the character issues, whether he's going to be a good or bad teammate. If you feed the man the football, he will be fine. That is like every single diva wide receiver in the NFL. All of them act that way when they're losing, when they're playing with bad quarterbacks, and when they're not getting the ball. If they're losing, I don't think they really care that much as long as they're getting theirs. Because if they're getting theirs, that means they're getting their money. And if you can't get the receptions on Sunday and the touchdowns on Sunday, you're not going to see that bank account be where you want it to be at. So for Deontay Johnson, yes, he's competitive. Yes, he wants to win. He also wants the damn ball and wants his money. And this is a contract year for Deontay Johnson. So I expect he's going to be on his best behavior. Otherwise, he's going to be in a bad situation entering free agency in 2025. My hope is he balls out and stays here in Carolina. Adam Thielen is back at age 34, and no one expected what he put up last year. Maybe his family did. Vikings fans who wanted Thielen still there in Minnesota with 100 receptions, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. Thielen was awesome and was the only consistent receiver for Bryce Young last year in Carolina, and now he returns. And I expect Adam to be a major part of this offense once again. Maybe not put up 1,000 yards, but if we can get 700, 800 out of Adam Thielen, plus with Deontay Johnson, a potential 1,000-yard receiver, and that's what you would want this year, is for him to be the 1,000-yard receiver. You would want Thielen to be it as well. Why not have 2? Don't want to get greedy. Why not? But still, if you're going to have a choice, Deontay Johnson and then Thielen right around 700, 750 yards receiving, that would be a good tandem for the Panthers this year. Jonathan Mingo, he is someone who has to step up this year. I can't look at anyone in this wide receiver core currently as we enter into April and know for a fact and feel confident about them being a long-term player for the Panthers. Johnson, I know he has the talent to do it. Is he going to mess with Bryce? Is he going to make the plays? I feel like he's going to, but if he enters free agency next year, the Panthers may be in a bidding war. Does he want to stay here in Carolina, especially if this is a team that unfortunately does not contend for the playoffs this year? There's a chance they could. Certainly there's a chance they could. I'm not a believer right now that that's going to be the case, but they play the games for a reason. What I have to say, what people have to write, doesn't really matter at the end of the day when it comes to who wins and who loses. It's just opinions, and I appreciate everyone up here for listening. And I'm not telling you not to listen, but still, they play the games for a reason. Our thoughts, immaterial at the end of the day of what happens in between the lines on Sunday, and I guess on Saturday, Thursday, Wednesday, Christmas Day. They play every damn day of the week they could at the NFL. Deontay Johnson has to play well, but he may not even be here in Carolina if he does have a breakout season once again. So we have to find someone who can stick around. And the guy who's under contract for the longest is Jonathan Mingo. Still 3 more years left on his rookie deal. And I was asked about it on the weekly Friday mailbag. If I could choose anyone non-Bryce Young to be an all-pro, I said it'd be Mingo. Yes, I've been hard on Jonathan Mingo because I just don't think he's that good of a player. Yeah, he's young. I should cut him some slack like I have with Bryce Young, but I was always a Bryce Young believer. Hated the pick from the beginning of Jonathan Mingo. Doesn't mean that Mingo can't come out to be a good player at the end of the day. It's going to take some time to develop. I'm just skeptical. But looking at his contract, the position that he plays, if he's the one who plays an all-pro level, that's a great thing for the Panthers moving forward. It's a great thing for Bryce Young as well to know, all right, I got this guy for the next 2+ years after the season. Let's go. Terrace Marshall Jr., also on the roster. Thought he may get cut. There's talent still there. We have not seen it, and I would love to see it. He has the size and the speed at a position the Panthers really need to find someone who can play at, and maybe he's going to be the guy. I don't know. I'm still waiting. You're still waiting. I'm not going to get my hopes up on this one, y'all. Amir Smith-Marset was more of a gadget guy last year. He was a punt returner as well. He's going to get an opportunity this season to potentially be a part of this offense as more than just, a trickster or a gadget guy. I guess is a better way to put it. We'll see what that looks like. He has speed, and the Panthers need speed. So good luck. David Moore back for his second go-around as a Carolina Panther wide receiver. Did not make the team last time around. I would not expect him to make the team this time around. I see him more as a practice squad guy who will get the occasional call-up based on what the game plan is and if there's any injuries. Other than that, not expecting too much. The other 3, Cam Sims, Jalen Camp, are also on the roster. And then Mike Strawn is someone who has ties to Frank Reich dating back to Indianapolis. He did get an opportunity late in last season with all the injuries and just guys just not playing well. I would not expect him to be sticking around long-term here in Carolina. So there's a quick look at part of the offense. I'll come back. I'll talk about the rest of the offense, and we'll also get into the defense here as we take a look at the depth chart here for the Carolina Panthers heading into this draft month right here on Locked On Panthers. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. And y'all, it's been a rough week for your boy watching the Tar Heels bow out and then Duke and State go do their thing. But there is the hope of UConn, who is just an absolute buzzsaw to cut down the nets this upcoming weekend, I guess next Monday in Phoenix. Right now, new customers, and that could be you, get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut the nets down. Taking a look at the Panthers depth chart as we begin to shift our focus to the draft at the end of the month, continuing to look at the offense tight end. Currently 5 players at the tight end position here in Carolina. Tommy Trimble, tight end 1. It is Trimble season, and a lot of y'all are fired up about it, and rightfully so. It's not like Tommy Trimble doesn't have the mold of someone who can be a average. I don't want to say high level, but at least an average, maybe above average pass catcher at the tight end position in the NFL. It's possible. We've seen it from the beginning. I've never really bought into it, just knowing that this is one of those positions coming to the NFL that's very difficult to transition from college and to be able to play at a high level, like at a Pro Bowl and all pro level, which is what the Panthers have had at tight end with Greg Olsen in the past and with Wesley Walls. We have become accustomed to the tight end mattering in the offense, and it has not mattered since Matt Rule unfortunately came to Carolina and put us down this path of mediocrity, which we're hoping to get out of. Thank you, David Tepper, for that. Tommy Trimble, though, I think that's a little bit too much to place on him. He's going to get the opportunity, and he really has never gotten the opportunity to be the guy until now. Now he's the guy. So I'm going to reserve the judgment of the past. I'm going to still be a little bit skeptical, but I'm going to put that aside as far as the judgment of the past, what he's done, and think about it. This is his opportunity. We talked about it when having our pre-free agency breakdowns of each roster position and asking, is this the time for Tommy Trimble, and looking at what K. Dotton did last year in Dave Canales' offense in Tampa Bay and thinking, if Tommy Trimble's given that opportunity, can he put up those kind of numbers? Can he be a 500-yard receiving tight end this year with the opportunities? Possibly. I wouldn't bet on it, but possibly, and we will see. So my hope is y'all are right. The Tommy Trimble hive, that he comes out here, he plays at the level that we would at least bare minimum expect out of a tight end here in Carolina, and he's a major part of the offense. So my hope is that. The same hope as y'all's. Ian Thomas, he's still here for whatever reason. Stephon Sullivan, okay, he's here. Jordan Matthews, much like Michael Strawn, a guy who has ties to Reich. He's only here last year because Frank Reich looked at him, and he used to play receiver. Now he's a tight end. He's just kind of hanging on there. You have Vanderbilt degree. You don't need to keep doing this. Jordan Matthews, maybe he needs the money. I don't know. But this is a tight end group. Chris Pierce as well, that I still don't love outside of Trimble. Would be nice to see them potentially draft somebody. But we'll get into draft needs on tomorrow's show. Offensive tackle, just breaking up the offensive line. Offensive tackle, Ike Ekwonu, Taylor Moton back at left tackle and right tackle, respectively. A big storyline going into the season is going to be Ike Ekwonu, his development under Joe Gilbert, the new offensive line coach here in Carolina. And if he can go back to playing like he did for the large part his rookie year and not play like he did last year, where he was an absolute liability at tackle and the Panthers did not have another option. Now they have an option this year. Josh Nijman, the former Virginia Tech Hokie, last playing with the Green Bay Packers. He started at right tackle before. He could potentially start at left tackle if need be. If Icky plays well, or if there's an injury to him or Taylor Moton, knock on wood, then you have someone with experience and talent in Josh Nijman. Great size on him to step up and come in. You did not have that last year. Brady Christensen also, who's better suited to be a tackle, can help you out in that respect. So if Icky or Taylor, if both of them go down, you got Josh Nijman and Brady Christensen who can step up and start. And that's a far better situation than the Panthers had last year. I love the increased depth there at the offensive tackle position. Il Manning, who they traded for late last season. I think they didn't trade for, rather. They signed him off the 49ers practice squad. God bless. That man missed the Super Bowl because the Panthers decided, come on, buddy, we're not going to play you, but come on down, and we can have you for the future. So future's here. Good luck, Il Manning. Ricky Lee from A&T, he's still here. And then the Badara Traore, he rounds up the offensive tackle list. Offensive guard, Damian Lewis, the Panthers spent a lot of money on him, and Robert Hunt. Those are your starting left guard and right guard, respectively. Brady Christensen mentioned he can be a swing tackle. He can also be the top guy to come off the bench at guard if need be. Cade Mays, Chandler Zavala, they have struggled at times, but they did get experience last year. Those two are back as developmental players at the guard spot. Interested to see with Joe Gilbert in this new offense where those guys end up landing and if they potentially are on the outs. They have not brought in any veterans outside of Josh Nijman, who is someone who's going to play tackle. They have not brought any veterans in at guard, other than, of course, the guys who are going to start that could potentially be backups, could take their jobs. Nash Jensen, that he was a favorite of the past coaching staff, UDFA out of North Dakota State, got a couple starts last season before being benched in those games in favor of Gabe Jackson. He's back. Then JD Dorenzo is also back to round out the guard spot in Carolina. Quick pause here. Then I'll come back, look at the defense, and then just tell y'all how I feel about how the Panthers did in free agency this year. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Personally, for me, maybe I'd sleep in. Maybe I go play some more golf or, just go do things I like to do. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Let's take a look at the Panthers defense. It's a new look defense here in Carolina in 2024. Ejiro Evero and the entire defensive coaching staff is back. That's the good news. The bad news is, well, some familiar faces and some players who made some plays over the last couple of seasons, they're no longer here. Dante Jackson, he's now a Pittsburgh Steeler. Von Bell, he's gone back to Cincinnati after being cut. Frankie Louvu said no to the Panthers offer. He's now a Washington Commander. Itor Gross-Matos, he is with the 49ers on an $18 million deal. Wow. And, of course, Brian Burns, he is now a New York Giant as the Panthers traded him away, not wanting to give him a lot of money. That means the Panthers need to go out and find some new starters on the defensive line, and also they could find some linebacker in the secondary. They needed to find a new rework defense, and I think that they did a fairly solid job. Looking at defensive line, Derek Brown off his Pro Bowl seasons back here in Carolina as the unquestioned best player on the roster, the unquestioned leader of this defense, and I expect him to have yet another outstanding season in 2024. Shai Tuttle, he's back after a terrible season, and because of the contract structure that Samir Suleiman and Scott Fitterer gave him last year, the Panthers did not have any recourse this offseason to get rid of him, so he's still here. The Panthers needed a big body anyways, so it's not necessarily a bad thing that he's here. He's a North Carolina guy. Hopefully, year 2 back home, he'll play better. A'Shawn Robinson has ties dating back to his time with the Rams that overlap with Ejiro Evero. He's now in Carolina. That was a common theme that we saw with Ejiro Evero getting guys that had played in the scheme, whether that had been the Rams or in Denver, coming over to Carolina this offseason. Those are your 3 starters on a defensive line. With Robinson coming in, you have to think this can be a better run-stopping team. Deshaun Williams did not do a great job at all in doing that. I think he's a Buffalo Bill now, so congratulations to him getting another opportunity. He just did not live up to it. A'Shawn Robinson, not going to be a pass rusher, and that's kind of the same thing you're getting at Shai Tuttle and Derek Brown, but he is going to be a solid run stopper, and that's what the Panthers desperately need. Nick Thurman, LeBron Ray, Raekwon Williams, those 3 guys are going to get an opportunity to be the depth pieces. I thought Thurman, especially late in the season, he showed a lot for the Panthers, and I would expect if Shai Tuttle, he ain't going to play well, why not give Nick Thurman an opportunity? LeBron Ray as well at defensive end. He's going to get an opportunity this season. Feel pretty good about the defensive line spot with Brown, with Robinson coming as a run stopper, and even some of the younger guys that showed something later in the season. Outside linebacker, the headliner here is Jadeveon Clowney. He's back home, a coup for the Panthers. I've questioned what they're going to get out of him, but you cannot disagree with the fact the Panthers needed to bring him back home, that he had an outstanding season with the Ravens, and he still has something to prove. He's back home, and you would think that would yield great results for the Panthers and for Clowney this season, who said on Friday when he was introduced to the media via Zoom that if he's healthy, he's a Pro Bowler. So if he plays 17 games, he's a Pro Bowler. I'm going to hold you to that, Jadeveon. Get it done, because I want that to happen. I want people to be throwing egg on my face, being like, oh, you doubted it. That's fine. And I love he's going back to number 7. I have a friend who's South Carolina alum. He was looking at Clowney going back to 7. He's like, it would be kind of sick to have a 7 Clowney jersey. I told him, if Clowney gets to double-digit sacks, I'm saying this right here on Locked. You're listening, you're watching, you're hearing me say this. If Clowney gets double-digit sacks this season, I will wear a Jadeveon Clowney jersey on this show. I'll have it backwards where you see the Clowney right here on my chest and the 7. I will proudly wear it. So if he gets 10 sacks, I'll do it. And I guess I'll buy the jersey on my own. Maybe you guys can go ahead and crowdsource it, start a GoFundMe if you want, because these jerseys are kind of expensive. And if y'all have kids and you're buying your kids' jerseys and these guys are going to different teams all the time, God bless, man. A lot of money spent on that, but I will do that if he goes out there and plays well. Big to beat the Jets, big to beat the Ravens out for him. He's back home. I'm excited. You're excited. Let's go. DJ Woonem, another Gamecock on the other side, 8 sacks last season. He's now stepping into a situation where he's going to be thought of as potentially someone who could be the dude who holds down one of those edge rusher spots for the next 5 or so years. We'll see whether that happens. He's coming off a partially torn quad, going to miss OTAs, it looks like, and that's not a great start. As long as he's healthy come August and he's healthy come September, we're not going to really be that worried about it. DJ Johnson, 3rd-round draft pick last year. He gets an opportunity to still come in, develop, and not be expected too much out of. He's going to get an opportunity again this year to potentially make some starts, depending on how he plays and what happens with Clowney and with Woonem. Amari Barno, been more a special teams guy. He's getting an opportunity again this year. Still kind of an awkward fit in his defense. Kaylavon Chason, he's back here. Todd Wash was a defensive coordinator in Jacksonville when he was selected 20th overall out of LSU. Been a bust to this point in time. The hope is this is a better defensive scheme, and he can go up there and step up. Eku Leota, Luigi Villain, they round out the outside linebacker spot. Inside linebacker, Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell. Those are the two guys. Josie Jewell, of course, is the replacement for Frankie Louvo in the middle of that defense. And either one of those guys, according to Dave Canales, can wear the green dot and call the plays. And that's good to have two interchangeable pieces like that in the middle of your defense at the linebacker spot. Tay Davis was re-signed on Friday. He, Claudin Cherilus, and Chandler Wooten are primarily special teams players. Would not feel confident in any of their abilities to step in and play if something were to happen to Thompson or Jewell. Corner, 7 corners right now. J.C. Horn, Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, those would be your starters. JC and Dane on the outside, Troy Hill on the inside as a slot guy, and he was really good for the Panthers last year with all the injuries in the secondary. He was one of the guys that was constantly healthy and gave us way more than I think a lot of us even expected out of Troy Hill. So great to have him back here in Carolina. He understands the system. DiCaprio Bootle, Deshaun Jameson, those are also players who had to step up because of injury, and they kind of balled, man. So I feel good about where the secondary is at as far as like, well, let me step back. I feel good if J.C. Horn's healthy. I feel good if J.C. Horn's healthy and that Dane Jackson has gotten an opportunity to start. He's been a full-time starter before, and Dan Morgan really likes him. I'm hoping that they can add somebody else in the draft. We'll get to that on tomorrow's show. But right now, it's not like it's a bad spot. There are some questions as far as feeling good about. Okay, we've seen last year when there was injuries, Bootle and Jameson, they stepped up and they weren't half bad. That's a good thing. Just need probably more high-level talent outside of J.C. Horn in that secondary group as far as the corners go. Safeties, Xavier Woods, he's back as a starter. Jordan Fuller, he's signed to a 1-year deal. He will be the starter. Then Nick Scott was bad last year in Cincinnati, but now he's here in Carolina with the starting experience in Los Angeles with the Rams. Also in Cincinnati last season before being benched. He comes in here. He's not going to be a starter, but there is obviously something to getting someone who's a veteran who understands the scheme, having dated back to his time in Los Angeles under Ejiro Evero, at least working with Ejiro Evero directly in that secondary. There is something good about having an experienced player, may not be the best, but he's an experienced player at the safety spot. And you couldn't really say that last year in most years, but the Panthers recently, that they have a backup safety who really has a lot of experience playing in games. Alex Cook, when he had to step up last year, much like Deshaun Jameson and DiCaprio Bootle at the cornerback spots, he came in. He played fairly well. Sam Franklin Jr., he's back in Carolina, one of the only rule guys that has been worth the damn for the Panthers, and he has been great as far as a special teams guy, and even got some opportunities last year at safety. They kind of fell out of love with him, gave Alex Cook an opportunity when they brought him off of, I believe it was a Giants practice squad. We'll see what his role is. Then Jamie Robinson, the draft pick last year, 5th rounder out of FSU. Didn't see a ton of him. Maybe he has an increased role. We will see. Of course, Eddie Pinheiro, Johnny Hecker, JJ Jansen, they round out the special teams. But looking at just free agency as a whole for the Carolina Panthers, I feel like it was successful. This is a team that wants to build through the draft and be able to plug some holes via free agency. You don't want to be big-time players every single year. And it feels like this team has really had to try to fill out its roster via free agency more so than the draft because they have not valued draft picks under Scott Pitter. We see that Dan Morgan is starting to value draft picks, trading away Brian Burns to get draft picks. Then when he traded away Dante Jackson to get Deontay Johnson, he didn't really part way with any picks. He just moved back later on in the draft. He understands, and he's already come out and said it, the best way to win in the NFL is to draft and to develop. The Panthers have not drafted well, and they have not developed them. Maybe they have drafted well. They just have not developed those players. I'm not quite so sure. All I know is the guys that they've taken over the last couple seasons have not produced on the field, and that has to change if this franchise is ever going to get out of this pit that David Tepper has them in right now. They have to be better at drafting and developing. Yes, Bryce Young has to play well, and that is the one thing that can really help if you suck at the draft like the Panthers do. But they cannot continue to go down the path of just focusing on free agency, paying bargain deals, and trying to maybe overpay for guys who really aren't that good, don't have that much of a market, and then you're getting 5, 7, 2 win seasons. I don't want to see that anymore. I like what they did this offseason. I think that outside of linebacker, they checked all the boxes that they needed to do. They may not have a wide receiver 1 right now. They maybe don't have a high-level starting corner opposite of J.C. Horn, but they do have a guy that has experience. They did get Deontay Johnson, who effectively is the number 1 wide receiver in Carolina and can separate, which really these guys couldn't do outside of Adam Thielen last year. they have plugged the holes with some veterans, but it's not like these are contracts they can't get out of. I was looking at overthecap.com. DJ Wonnum. My hope is, and I think the Panthers' hope is, that he comes in, he produces like he did last year in Minnesota, have another 7-8 sack season, and he's somebody you can keep around for a couple seasons, not just one season. If he does flounder, the Panthers would only have $625,000 of dead money on the books next year, and they would save $7.5 million. That's not a bad contract at all for the team's perspective. You look at Ashawn Robinson. I look at him as probably only a one-year guy. If he comes in, he's just okay, not great, and the Panthers want to move on, $4.1 million dead money, $4.5 million of cap space that they save. Dane Jackson, if he comes in, doesn't play well enough, he's a liability, $2.5 million dead money, 3.3 that they can save. And we've seen in the past, like DJ Chark, he has $3 million of dead money. Well, how is that possible? He was only on a one-year deal. He's a free agent. It's possible because the Panthers added void years to his contract. So that's $3 million the Panthers have to deal with for a player who was god-awful this past season. You look at Justin Houston, his half a sack. He also had void years added to his contract. I looked at the deals for Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, K'Lavon Chaisson, all guys on one-year deals. No void years at all. Dan Morgan said we're not doing that. And more importantly, Brett Tiller said, nope, I don't do void years. That's great. The Panthers cap situation is in a better place than it was before with Scott Fitter and with Samir Suleiman. Love that they don't have void years. Love that these are deals that are short-term. And if these guys stink, they can get out of it. Not a lot of dead money that they got to take on. Right now, $45 million of dead money. Can't have that. A large part, that's because of restructures. Only restructure we saw was Ian Thomas. And even if they get rid of him, not going to hurt him that much. So the Panthers, contract-wise, they're in a better spot with Brent Tillis and Dan Morgan at the helm than they were previously with Scott and with Samir. And I love that. Yes, they need to add some more talent. They don't have the high-level talent that a team's going to need to compete at a high level in the NFL, but it's a rebuilding effort. And as far as what I've seen since Canales has come here, since Dan Morgan's taken over, and since Brent Tillis has also been here, I like it. Will it lead to wins this year? TBD. I'm not expecting playoffs. I'm just going to enjoy the process. And it's not like the Panthers have gotten the process that wrong in the past. It's just, how has it worked? Like the process, I don't disagree with. The practice, though, it has not worked out. I'm thinking right now, the process, I love it. But when put in practice, when they actually have to see the results, will we get them this fall and beyond? They don't have to go to the playoffs this year, but you need to see Bryce develop. You need to see a defense that's not going to be a liability that can at least get off the field. And they're going to take a step back, but let's see them take a step forward in red zone defense and in takeaways and in sacks and some other numbers that were down last year at the bottom of the NFL. Let's see some just improvement, getting the football right. That's what Dave Canales is focused on. That's what I'm focused on. The wins and losses, yes, they matter. I've only been on here for 3 years of Locked On Panthers, 3 seasons, and I have seen 2 wins last year, 5 before, 5 after that. So what is that, 12 victory podcasts? Sorry, it's 7. 7, 5, 2. So 14 victory podcasts I've done. I'm as sick as y'all are at watching this team lose. But I'm going to enjoy the process, and I feel like maybe things are finally heading in the right direction, and that's a pretty good feeling. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow as we begin to discuss the Carolina Panthers draft needs and start focusing in on this draft month.